Great.
That's great.
Me too.
So, Laura, you want to kick it off?
Sure, let's go. So welcome in today. We're so happy you're here. My name's Laura Vaughn. I recognize many of you, of course, many familiar faces here today. I'm the community leader for M3 Linked, and we're sponsoring this great event today with M3 Linked. We are a community of entrepreneurs and business leaders who gather on a regular basis to cheer each other on, support each other in the entrepreneurial journey, which, as many of you know, can be frustrating, lonely, and all the other things, but also incredibly rewarding, especially when we do it with others. So part of what we do at M3 Linked, we host regular weekly gatherings for people to meet and connect and collaborate. And then sometimes we like to take a certain topic with a certain member and go a little deeper. And so what you're joining us for today is an M3 deep dive. And Av Utakuri is a member of M3 Linked in Toronto. And Av has an incredible amount of wisdom to share around the science of remote meetings and remote presentations, and then the action we should be taking as well, presenters in any shape or form as a result of that research. So I'm here to host, I'm watching the chat channel, questions and so on, but Av's really the expert and he's going to give us tons of tips and insight for today. So over to you, Av.
Thank you so much, Laura. So there's a last minute change that happened because Nick, my partner, got COVID. And yeah, and he was, this morning, he called me going, I think I can make it. I think I can get over. I'll join in on Zoom. And he was coughing and I go, you want to go back to sleep, right, Nick? And he goes, if I can, I don't want to leave you guys stranded. And I said, absolutely. So there's a bunch of slides that he presents that I was going to take a shot on last minute. We were scrambling to try and figure it out. So, but I will give you an insight into what he does and I do as well. So Laura was gracious enough. She's going to be my live co-host.
Co-host for today.
And part of the thing is I'm actually going to talk about here is that whole aspect of digital transformation and how we're going to hold events. Is everything coming in smoothly for everyone? Awesome. That's really great.
Lots of head nods. Yep.
Lots of head nods.
Love it.
So, okay. So jumping in, and that's why this says January the 27th. I don't even know what the date is because I switched it out like in the last 5 minutes. So, okay. So my name is Av Utakuri to the people who don't know me. And I am a serial entrepreneur. I graduated at University of Toronto in engineering back in the late 90s. I've always been in the technology space, inventing things. I've probably written about 1 million lines of code in the past, but I love to solve, really meaningful problems and apply technology because I am a firm believer that when technology works, it should disappear. You shouldn't even know it. And the most amazing aspect of that is this. We use it, we consume it, we live our lives by it. We don't even think about it. But our video conferences are the complete opposite of that. We constantly know that this is not working, this is working, right? You're on mute.
It's right in our faces. Yes.
All the problems that happen on every single day, right? How many times do we say, I think you're on mute?
If it doesn't happen every day, then it's been a bad day.
So absolutely. So I'm going to have about 2 or 3 objectives, and we're going to have a hot seat here where we're going to go through a mock presentation. The intention is to go ahead and teach you some of the best understanding. So first up, I'm going to teach you the science behind focus, how people grab attention, how do they drive focus, what is memory. Now, I won't be able to deep dive into the neuroscience, but I'm going to give you a taste of it. I host all sorts of webinars. I bring in cognitive behavioral scientists. I bring in psychologists. I bring in entrepreneur leaders, community leaders, and convert your presentations into conversations. That's a big one. We all get into the mode of presenting. And the funny thing is I ask people this all the time. If you're in a face-to-face meeting, let's just say I showed up, I put a paper bag on my head, okay? And I go, I'm sorry, Laura, I'm not gonna take my paper bag off today. I didn't brush my hair. And I sit in front of you in the boardroom and I read a 210 slide deck presentation to you. Are you impressed?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Never do it.
But then we do that virtually. We do that virtually. How come? Okay. I want to also talk about this virtual presence. How do I make people feel like they're in the same room together? Demonstrate best practices. So, a couple of quick house rules. This is a live webinar.
Mhm.
Very few people conduct live events. It's all
It
pre-recorded,
has
isn't
become
it?
very uncommon, you're right.
It's all pre-recorded.
Mhm.
So you just, what do you do as soon as you pre-record it? This is what I do. Skip, 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 skip.
2 times. I go 2 times.
I go 2 times, 2.5. I actually use the slider to go, hold on, he's saying something here. So you can't do that here. And I'm going to show you how to engage with us. First off, turn on your video. I would love for it if you're able to turn on your video, because we actually are seeing you. I got a big TV screen here.
Mhm.
Laura can see you. We can see each other. It'll help us engage. If you can, please do it. Number 2, don't worry about noise unless you're in a construction site. You know, I don't want to go to someone, you're on mute. Like we just started off this conversation with that. Let's have natural conversations, right?
Yep, that's
So-
what human beings.
Let's be human beings. So you don't have to worry about hitting that space bar or clicking that, button constantly. So if you can. So because it's live, I would love the comments. I'd love questions. It's interactive. We are going to go ahead and share. We're going to go ahead and communicate and actually make each other feel like we are creating a live M3 event, aren't we?
Mhm.
We don't. Now, you told me when I joined, you used to have live M3 events, correct?
In
used to
some
get together?
communities, yeah, and hopefully in Toronto, we're actually going there soon. But yes, in some communities, we do them in person and in virtual.
There you go. So
it's both.
we got to try and figure out how to do that without, in the new way.
Yep.
So share, comment, learn. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to jump into the meat of the presentation, which is the challenges that we all face with remote communication. And you've been a great example of how you've transformed, and I'm going to ask you for your feedback. So first step, remote and hybrid have enormous value. None of us are going to go ahead and disagree, but we're also all small business owners, right? Some of us are solopreneurs, some of us have employees. And I think that there's an enormous amount of challenges in the complexity of communication now. How do you build culture? How do you build consistency of message? How do you train people and onboard them where they're not feeling like they're just watching a whole bunch of movies and you click next, 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 right? Like, how do you make this information stick? How do we do all of that? And when people are working from home, there are absolutely a lack of boundaries. There is a work-life balance. There's actually a lot of anxiety. There is a ton of anxiety that we're not connecting with each other as people. We're not connecting with our customers. There's something actually very satisfying when you go to a customer location or partner location, you have a face-to-face meeting and you have a great experience, isn't there? I feel it's like that car thunk experience. When that car door like has that car door feel, when you walk out of
That's not the analogy I was expecting. To use.
but when you have this, the kathunk, you go, I nailed that, right? we don't have that in remote meetings, do we?
No.
So now what happens is we all know the stats, 250% increase in video conferencing. So we went from, does anybody remember before 2018, how many video conferences were we on a daily basis? Does anybody put it up on chat, say something? Do you guys even remember? I think the biggest problem I used to have back then is this 1-800 numbers and you have to figure out what the dial-in was. I think I used to do that once a week, right? Remember you had to those pound. So now, curious, where's everybody calling in from today? You want to put it up in chat? I'd love for you to talk about where we're coming in from. Oops, sorry. There we go. Michigan, there we go, Toronto. So we're all over the place. So how many, how many virtual conversations are we having on a daily basis right now? I'd love to take a poll here. What are you seeing?
3 to 5, 3 to 5. David, is that 3 to 5 a day? 3, probably.
Yeah, 3 to 5 a day, 1 to 2 a
4
day,
more a day,
right?
1 to 2 a day.
So let's say as entrepreneurs, we're working at least 82 days a week, month. So
Yes, we had figured out how to put more time into
Right?
regular work.
So I'd say
Yes.
what, 60, 100 meetings a month,
Something like that.
right? Like compared to 0. And how many do we actually remember? So close your eyes. Tell me on the spot. How many do you remember? Like, don't look at your notes. How many pop out? Anybody? How many pop out? About half. Wow, so that's incredible. That's pretty good. Anybody else remember half of their online meetings? Not ones you're presenting, ones you're being presented to. So there you go, take notes, right? It's usually about 3, 4, 5, 6% in that type of range. So what happens is there's a huge amount of memory loss, right? They are only 15 minutes to shorten them. Actually, the shorter they are, David, sometimes it can be harder. You don't have enough sensory inputs. We'll talk about that. And what it is screens are inherently more distracting. So there's a lot of neuroscience research to say, did you know that if you read a real book versus an ebook, your MRI image is completely different. Reading a real book will trigger deeper neural connections than reading an ebook. It's the feel of the paper.
The physicality of it?
Physicality of it. It's the printed paper, how it actually reacts with light, how you focus on a screen versus not. There's a lot of neurological research to show digital, and here's another example. Digital conversations are different than real world conversations. So classic example is if I take a baby and I put a TV screen in front of the baby, it'll know, even a newborn will know the difference between parents on TV versus parents in real life. Anybody here who have kids, I mean, you're going to attest, there's no way you're going to fool a 6-month-old with a TV versus, right? So what it is our brains inherently know the digital data, and they're constantly looking for what is a real piece of information I should index. And there's a process by which our brain works on. How am I going to go ahead and do it? So there's these critical cognitive processes that help you comprehend and learn information. So we have to trigger those type of pathways in order to have a meaningful meeting. So when you think about remote work, the stats are quite staggering. We all know that it exploded, but 54% of people would leave their current job. You've heard of the Great Resignation. 46% just in the UK experience deep loneliness. I'm sure you've heard all the stats, alcoholism, mental health. Things have gone up dramatically with remote meetings. I mean, even the commute can be therapeutic, to be honest. Like the idea of taking a break for lunch and going downstairs and finding a food truck, and like there are lots of things in our daily life that we take for granted that disappear, right?
Right, that processing time. We don't get the processing time.
Absolutely, we don't. And then we also lose the human interaction time, right? So what happens is this is the big one. Where's the engagement, right? So our brains have evolved to connect with faces, to connect with smiles, to connect with real world type of information. As a baby, do you know that as a newborn, to smile is an incredibly complex thing? It takes up, does anybody know it's like 37 muscles or something to formulate a smile? And instead of focusing on surviving, a baby will put all of its effort into tracking your eyes and smiling, because as I told my wife, if they didn't do that, we would like leave them in the woods because they're such a pain in the butt when they're young, aren't they?
Babies and puppies, it's a good thing they're cute.
It's a good thing they're cute. So you have to have this engagement. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's a newborn engaging with you or your team engaging with you, you actually have to connect, right? So what happens with the engagement, this is a great quote that I heard. So in cognitive behavior, there's actually a technical term called the cocktail party effect. So what this means is all of us have gone to those cocktail parties where we go, hey, yeah, I remember you, right, Laura, right, and we should get together, and we never do. How many of us have done that, right? Okay, so what happens with cocktail party effect is you're not really getting a meaningful connection. You say hi to a whole bunch of people, and you don't really absorb information about them, compared to them coming over and having brunch at home, and you're cooking and you're breaking bread together, completely different. So this particular cognitive scientist said, remote meetings are like cocktail parties. And I'm like, wow, that is brilliant. We jump from meeting to meeting. At a high level, we absorb tiny little bits of information.
Bits and pieces.
And we all go, we should do this again. Right?
Yeah, unless you're at an M3 forum, then we actually
there you
do
go.
it again.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there is something to this cocktail party effect. And what actually happens is we have to understand most of us can only store 3 to 4 pieces of information. Okay, so you have to learn how to simplify the message, because you've got to get to the root of it. And if you try to remember more information, the resolution of what you're taking away actually gets compromised.
What do you mean by resolution? It gets foggy, it gets
foggier.
blurry. Okay.
Right. So there might be details in that piece of information, but the resolution goes away. So what happens is one of the first things that we have to do is simplify to be able to connect with someone. What's the key message that you want to go ahead? So if you're going to treat something as a cocktail party, you got to get to the root of the issue very, very quickly, right? And you also have to stop people from multitasking. Part of the problem that happens at a cocktail party, again, is I'm talking to you, but I'm checking out who else I could be talking to, right? Wow, there's a new person coming in. Susie's got new shoes or whatever that's going on. We are constantly multitasking. So these are the reasons why a lot of remote meetings, not only are we trying to, so we actually have to kind of transform our meetings. And there's a whole technique as to how to go ahead and do that. So we know that we have limited resources. And for me, from a future of work, from an engagement point of view, now some of you actually have employees, some of you don't, but think of it this way. All of us are working for someone. We're working for our customers, we're working for our partners. And even if this doesn't directly impact you, it might impact your relationships with your customers. So 70%, over 1,000 people got polled by Atlassian and one of the technology companies out there. They are trying to figure out how to create stronger relationships, even if it's online, right? Like our relationships are not the same. Number two, transparency in decision-making, right? So how do you get to more transparency? Because if you're able to get to more transparency, let's say you're charging more money, your prices went up. Like, how do you get buy-in? How do you come in and go, these are the challenges? Like there's so many examples of this, these are high level. And feedback. How do you give the optimal amount of feedback such that you are connecting, right? So those are some of the key things that we have to look at from an engagement point of view. So how many people resonate with this? I got 210 slides. I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to read through. Anybody been in one of those presentations? Anybody? Right? So now what happens is I want to actually show you from a neuroscience point of view. I'm actually going to pick on a volunteer here. So somebody who wants to be on the spot and read, can somebody give me a hand up here? Or I'm just going to pick randomly right here. Is that okay? Hey, Jeff, I see you right there in the middle of the screen. Can I pick on you? Awesome. Okay, I want you to do something right here. I don't want you to read the word blue. I want you to read the color red. Can you go through and read?
Sure. Red, blue, green, red, yellow, red, black, black, green, yellow, red, white.
How hard was that? How hard was that?
That took a lot of thought.
That took a lot of thought, isn't it? Now, so what it is your brain does not want to understand context. So the way that reading happens, and I'm going to tell you why slides work and why slides don't. There's a whole reason for this. So there's a neural pathway, just like you know how when you burn your finger, you pull your finger back before the pain hits. There's a whole bunch of neural pathways in which reading becomes a subconscious process. You're basically jumping through and you're scanning and you're not caring about the context. The words just come through. Now, Jeff, I'm going to pick on you again, and I'm going to show you how in a different type of test, this is called a Stroop test. I want you to read this text right here. It's all scrambled, but go for it.
Okay, according to a research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter what order the letters are in, the letters in the word are. The only important thing is that the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problems. This is because the human mind does not read every letter itself, but the word as a whole.
Isn't that amazing? So I can actually even replace letters with symbols and numbers. You can actually read it without that much difficulty, isn't it? So it's actually doing something like a scan. It actually doesn't read. Your brain doesn't read. It scans through. It doesn't get context, right? It gets confused by digital technologies. It doesn't pay attention. It's trying to multitask. How in the world are you going to cut through all that clutter, right? So what happens is there's all of these things add up to something called cognitive bias. I don't know if you've heard of that term, cognitive bias, but cognitive bias is a mechanism by which your brain is going to say, I know what's going on. That happens all the time, doesn't it? I mean, think about our news cycle these days.
I know where this is going.
Exactly. Cognitive bias makes us automatically tune out because I go, hey, Jeff, Sarah, Laura, I know what you're talking about. I scanned that slide. I read the first and the last word, letter, sorry. I know exactly what you're saying. And I don't need,
I'm moving on.
I'm moving on. You said yellow here,
Right.
but it really was blue, and you didn't even read the letters in the middle.
Right.
Right? Okay, so that's what's happening with the slide. So first up, I'm going to show you some of the tips and tricks. I'm going to focus this on Zoom today. You can do this on any platform at all. And one of the things that you can actually look for is a lot of people look at themselves in camera and they go, oh, I don't turn on my camera because I don't like how I look. Okay, or it doesn't make me feel comfortable. So one of the quick things is under video, there's a couple of simple things called mirror my video. So when you turn left and right, okay, is the image moving in the opposite direction? Because subconsciously we're looking at a mirror. When I go to my bathroom mirror and I look, the image follows me. But some cameras on their laptops flip that image. So when I'm moving left, that image is moving right. Do you know what I'm saying? If I hand up my right hand, the Zoom camera will show you my left. Automatically, my brain goes, something is wrong. I don't like myself in that image because we don't know why. So there's a button here called mirror my video. If you mirror it, as an example, this is what happens when I mirror it in here. So when I'm moving left and right, it's actually going the opposite direction. But I want to feel natural, and that's a key simple trick that you can go ahead and do to mirror. So the other thing that you can also do is use dual monitors. And I'm going to explain that in a second, because as soon as you start presenting, everybody becomes a tiny postage stamp right here. You don't have enough screen real estate to look at your presentation, yourself, and the audience. Everything is being jammed in. But getting multiple monitors on your desk is an incredibly low-cost investment that allows you to transform your remote experience. And I'm going to talk about that too. So most apps, whether it be Google Meet, all of that, have something similar. So you got to be able to go ahead and leverage that. So now what happens is if you have a second monitor with Zoom right there, your audience is right here, and you are working here. It actually separates out the spaces. Now I have a clear boundary, because that's what's actually happening in a lot of times when I sit at a desk. I'm working my laptop. What do? I look up and I see you across the table right there. But if everything gets muddled, your brain again is not focusing where it needs to focus. Like we're used to those type of body language. Like I'm going to turn, I'm going to take a look at you, I'm going to look back. So these are all the little subconscious little things that make us feel something is not right. Okay, so simple things. And again, if you have Zoom right now, play with the mirror and make sure that it's the right way and turn on lights. And we're going to talk about all that next, right? But simple things. Next up is there is something called statistics. If you go to the statistics tab, it'll actually show you what Zoom is doing. So for example, I'm at 4 frames per second and nobody is hearing me or seeing me properly. Just to give you a context, you want to be 15 frames per second or greater, or else check your internet. Make sure from your internet point of view, because again, nobody tells you this. They'll just go, okay, like she was like a stop motion puppet that just came up and they were breaking up on the video. Rarely do people go, unless they completely lose you or they can't hear you, that something is wrong. A lot of times they just suffer through. They just suffer through, and then you're not making an impression, right? So I always have some of these stats up. Teams also has something like this. Zoom also has this. Before I jump on a call, I make sure that there's nothing wrong with my internet and etc. Or else you have no idea how this is coming through. So the next topic we're going to talk about is setting up your stage. Okay, you got your tech up, you got your image the right way, you've got your second monitor, you know you're doing well. What is a stage? So let's talk about a stage. Not in the performance from a stage. A boardroom is a stage, isn't it? Like
anytime we're conveying a message one way.
It's a stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
So your office is a stage. I mean, there's a reason why people segregate a boardroom and say, this is how it has to be, right? You're not going to go ahead and have meetings in the lunchroom. So what's your stage? So up front, from a stage point of view, I want to know that you are looking your best, because what happens when my brain is not processing your face properly, I again stop paying attention. I have to present myself as a real person that's right there. So everybody, I want to make sure that a lot of people have the laptop low and it's looking up at their face. Okay. Now, if you've got some books around, take some books and put it underneath your laptop. Let's stack it up and raise that laptop and find a spot that you actually like. Sue, I see a few of you moving. Adam, try to go ahead and increase the height of the laptop. Adam has absolutely, so what you have is you're again going to find yourself in a much better angle. That's going to make a difference. Sue, yeah, you got a whole bunch of books. Let's actually get you moving up. There you, absolutely, right? Like, and then you want to go ahead and frame it. Now, if it turns out that from your environment point of view, you have a tough time getting the right angle, invest in a little tripod and a camera from Amazon, right? Get something in, because that is your most important impression. Like, do not live by the quality of your camera on your laptop. That's the smallest investment that you can make to go ahead and improve. Lighting. So great example is you have a lot of light coming in on the side, but obviously, again, we do not want someone to squint, or we do not want anyone to go ahead and struggle to go ahead and find you, right? Because in a real world situation, we're sitting across the table from each other in a well-lit environment. It makes a huge difference in order to go ahead and get that together. So put the light behind, so that it scatters. You can take a desk lamp, you can move things around, and you'll be the best judge. Be happy with that image, because that's how you're going to show up, right? Do not go ahead and compromise. And you have an awesome setup in all of your M3.
We got a lot of lights in our room.
You got a lot of lights, but you don't have to invest into a huge amount. I mean,
no, they're not big lights.
IKEA lamps, man. Yeah, IKEA lamps, $25-30, you're up and running. You do not have to do too much. Then I'm going to jump into some of the best practices before we jump into some of the hot seats here. Okay. So first up, we talked about our 210 slide deck now. So how do we use the deck? It's a visual aid. Okay, so they're not coming to go ahead and see your deck. If the meeting could be done by a deck, why didn't you email it?
Why are we doing this?
Right? Why are you doing this? So they're here to listen to you.
And see you.
And see you.
Right? Because you're more interesting to me than the slide.
Oh, hopefully. Tell our marketing department that. Right? Tell your corporate marketing, hey,
sure,
there you go. Classic sales versus marketing, isn't it?
True.
But absolutely, isn't it? You have to be able to step up. We're all consultants, we're all salespeople, we all are leaders. So we have to leverage that deck as a visual aid, which means a whole bunch of things, which I'm going to go ahead and get into. A deck for presenting is not the same as a deck for sharing. This is number one rule. People think that the same deck I present, I'm going to go ahead and share. If that's the case, I'll just watch the video and skip through every 10 seconds, right? I'll go back to what we talked about. So let's actually add value as you as a presenter. Hold some information back. Have some empty space, and we're going to talk about that. Because people want to talk to people, isn't it? Not a deck. They're going to buy from you. They're going to build trust with you. They're going to feel confident with you. That's your deck. So a deck is only 7% of the value of a presentation. Don't ask me how someone figured that out.
Wow. So the deck is 7% of my presentation.
Okay.
But how, this is anecdotal, probably you don't have stats on this, but I'm curious how much time most people would invest in their slides compared to what we invest in our language, the words we're choosing, the flow, right? Like I don't know. I think that we probably spend way more than 7% of our time on our slides.
We do.
And it should probably be the opposite.
It's the opposite, right? So the deck is a visual aid to trigger a memory for me and give you a reference point for you. And I'm going to talk about that. So what happens with a lot of companies and a lot of people is they just go full screen with the deck. I'm actually going to change this up right now, okay? I'm here, and I'm going to get rid of all my visual, and I'm just going to talk. I became a disconnected individual now. You don't see my face anymore. In about a minute or so, your brain will stop engaging. The same neurons won't fire anymore. You go off and you actually will start getting bored subconsciously. You won't even realize it.
I'm already bored. I'm in the
You're in the room. There are different reasons. So, but that's exactly the point is understand that it's only about 7%. And a lot of these type of tests that give you this, they do look at neural response. They do put people in MRI machines. They do look at ECGs. They look at eyes. Okay, so these are the common tests. I have an eye tracker and I'm actually looking where you're looking, where you focus. There's many cognitive tests that show you focus. So I don't know the details of the 7%, but it's quite telling. There's quite a bit of neurological research that shows that. So that's exactly the first thing. And the next thing is you do have to build a narrative. Okay, now when I say narrative, I know what a lot of us are going to think. Okay, I am selling paper clips. How do I build a narrative? I sell, a black box, right? So narrative is not just the art of the story about personalization. Narrative is understanding the structure of a story to go ahead and get someone through your presentation. So there's a start, there's a middle, there's an end, right? There is a key message, there is an important fact, and there's a takeaway, right? So you do not have to think about a narrative as I have to make some complicated story. What's the start of my message? What's the key thing that I want them to learn from it, right? What's the end of it so that it doesn't drag on? And what are the things that I want them to remember? And have I articulated what I want to get out of it, right? A lot of times we go into a presentation and we just go, here's the facts according to me. Not necessarily what do they need to hear? What do they need to hear, right? That's a classic marketing because we've got this widget, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, I'm going to get this. And the customer's going, oh, I'm the wrong person. I don't even need any of this, right? So it's actually this constant idea as to how you go ahead and chunk the information out. Next up is focus. So one of the biggest problems that you have in remote meetings is when I'm face to face, I can look over your shoulder right here and you can point things out. Or because Laura's in the room with me, I can actually point to something and say, this is where I need you. And I know where she's looking. She knows where I'm looking. It's really easy to communicate. So the funny thing that happens here right now is Scott or Jeff, you might be looking in a certain direction. I have no idea what you're looking at. I'm looking here. You're looking over there. I don't even know if you're reading the same thing. And there's actually a disconnect. So what actually happens with our brains is you might be reading this sentence right here, but I'm talking about it here. I want you to focus here, but you're looking over there. There's no mechanism by which I can connect what you're reading, what you're saying, and what you're getting out of this. So your brain basically takes that as very low value information because things are not lining up. But what does an amazing teacher do? They come in and they write and they make you pay attention, isn't it? There's power in that. What happens is I'm actually telling you, I want you to look here. As soon as I start writing or pointing, is your eye automatically going there? Right? So your key message is here. I'm a customer looking for your services. I could be looking completely, not even paying attention to you, but I'm going to reinforce my message. I got to go ahead and reinforce that message because suddenly if I reinforce it, and does anybody know how many times a message has to be repeated before it actually, we've all heard these numbers, put it up on chat or say something. 7, there you go, 7. Right? It's in that 5, 6, 7 times. But you know what also is interesting, Jeff, is it's not just you have to hear it. You have to read it also. You have to see it. You have to be repeated to it. Okay? So it's not just one sense. You also have to, underline and highlight that message over and over again. So coming back to our structure is, we're going to simplify a presentation, we're going to transform it, we're going to use the story to start, middle, and end, and we're going to help our audience focus. So you know what I'm doing here? I'm building up the list of what we're talking about, because when we get onto the hot seat, we're going to go ahead and try and see how we can go ahead and do that. Then final thing is conversations. We want to have a conversation. Not one of us want to present. Would we all agree? I'd rather have a conversation with someone. The presentation is irrelevant.
Two-way is more fun than one way.
Absolutely, right? And now in a broad group setting, you might not have that. Now it changes slightly. If I'm giving a keynote speak with an audience, I still want to stand out and have a mechanism by which I project and I have impact. But generally, I'd like to go ahead and have that as a conversation. So now what we're going to do is, by the way, the tool that I'm using for all of this is called Reactiv Suite, and that's what I've been developing. So I'm a part of a startup. We've been at it for 18 months. We've been testing the hell out of this tool to try and understand how we can take anyone. And this is, don't be intimidated by this whole setup. This is just my laptop driving a big screen. I could do this whole thing with my laptop and a pen and or a mouse, and like there's lots of ways to go ahead and do it. But the idea behind the neuroscience of it is three aspects. I'm going to elevate my executive presence. That's critical. Your content is only worth about 7%. Then more importantly, I have to guide you and I have to go ahead and structure my presentation. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to pause for a second, but I'm going to jump into a hot seat and I'm going to show you live what we're going to do. Any questions so far?
Can I say something about, this isn't a question.
Yes.
What I've noticed,
Okay.
because I've watched Av do a couple of these before, and I always get something out of it. What I've noticed when you stop to write
Okay.
on the screen,
Got it.
it actually grabs my attention for another reason, not just because you're writing, but because you've paused, you've gone quiet. In the professional speaking world, there's this concept of beats. And for anybody out there who's a fast talker, sometimes we forget to like pause. But the pause is so powerful.
It is.
What I've noticed is when you stop and write, I don't just get the benefit of the contrast of the written word over the spoken word and the visual.
Slows us down.
That it slows you down, and you give me that pause, which allows me to process what you just said and what you're writing on screen. So I think it can force us, people who are delivering content, to
Got it.
insert those pauses.
So there's actually a real neurological reason for that. And the reason for that is the way our memories happen. I don't remember all the parts of the brain, so forgive me if I'm wrong here. But what happens is we actually have these memories that are created in real time, and they need to be indexed into a short-term memory. Think of it like you're filling up this bucket, okay? So it's almost like a hard drive writing. Like what happens is there's one thing I'm writing to my local hard drive, then OneDrive takes over and it syncs it to the cloud, okay? Think of it like that. So our OneDrive sync to the cloud happens at night. When you sleep, your brain goes through all of the local files on your local hard drive and says, that takes about 24 hours. In 24 hours, it syncs it to long-term memory. But when you're in a presentation, you do have to come up with those natural pauses. I cannot remember the research. It's anywhere between that 2 to 3 seconds because it needs to dump the file out, okay? So think of it like that. It absolutely is dumping the file out, and at night it takes, now also when it dumps the file out, it actually has to have multiple senses agree, because you don't want to create a whole bunch of files all the time.
Right.
Your brain actually has a very amazing mechanism by which it figures out what's important or not, right? Or else, and some people don't have that control and they have photographic memories, right? So that's very rare, but generally they have a whole bunch of things. Drive is laggy, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump in right now. Genevieve, you're there?
Yes,
Awesome.
I see I'm first.
Thank you. Absolutely. So I would love to go ahead and give you coaching as to what I normally do with a lot of my friends and partners. So can you give me a quick 30 seconds introduction about you, your company? Let's go for it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Genevieve from Marquee Benefits. So I'm a employee benefits consultant. I also specialize in group retirement plans as well. I basically manage and help employers have an optimal benefits program for their employees, making sure that it's sustainable from a financial perspective, but also meeting the needs of the employees with their healthcare. I guess that's a 30 seconds overview. The one thing that I'm already thinking about, Av, from what you said and my presentation you're going to show is that comment you said about the sharing deck not being the same as the presentation deck.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is really going to show that.
Okay, awesome. Now, is this a deck you also present and share? Is that what you go ahead and do?
In this particular example, it was to kind of start the conversations about what we do as a benefit consultant. And this was kind of something I did with a accounting firm. So we kind of talked about different strategies. So this presentation isn't really geared for specific clients, but it does, I could take things from it as I meet with clients. So that's why I chose this one, because I thought, it would be really helpful because I could mold it, in other situations.
So it's a top of the funnel deck. It's a great introduction conversation starter. Is that how you describe it? Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So you'd give this to anybody. You'd give this to anybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Pieces of it. The way it's organized right now would be more for third parties that I would be centers of influence. Maybe that's the right term.
No, that's perfect. No, that gives me a good level of context here.
Yeah.
Okay, so jumping in, tell me what you would present over here.
So the way that we wanted to have a high level slide about our process.
Okay.
And what I would do is lay out this, high level view of all of the important pieces of what we do for our clients. And then depending on that client or whoever I'm meeting with, I would focus on certain sections. So in this presentation, I'm only focusing on the first two. So this is more of an overview conversation, this slide.
Fair enough. So well-designed foundation, success benefits, target access, evaluate, educate, commitment. So these are various services that you offer. These are various aspects of the business.
And what you get from us throughout the year and as part of our engagement, and we work our clients through this process.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So tell me first up, if you're thinking about the story arc, what is the start of the story? So why are we even here talking to you? So let's forget the deck. Let's have a natural conversation. I met you right now, and so what's the elevator pitch, or what is it that you want to do to start the conversation?
Well, this is where I suck.
Okay.
The elevator pitch. I'm going to be fully transparent.
That's fine. Let's go for it.
What's
a conversation starter?
And that's how I feel about meeting new people, either it's online or on phone or in person, is to engage in a conversation piece right off the bat. I don't want to use slides unless I have to. Right. So I usually start by creating a space where they understand that what we do is very customizable. So because we're a consultant, that's the approach I want to bring to the table. I also want to bring them ideas. I don't like being a client and the person keeps asking me questions about my business. I like to give them clues. I like to give them things that are happening in the market today, trends. So then once they start sharing back their needs, I can then bring in the piece of customization and lead them down a road that's going to be within their investment threshold. It's going to be within their risk strategy, and then we can really mold a plan for them. So that's where I start the conversation rather than reading a slide.
Perfect. So does everybody feel like that's actually a great start of a story, what she just said? Isn't it? Yeah. That's a great start of a story, isn't it? Right? So the funny thing is we look at our marketing content and we think that it doesn't have to be that. Mm-hmm. But so from a great start of the story point of view, you're right, Genevieve, you don't have to go ahead and use the deck, but it's a very powerful visual aid. So it's called associative learning, right? So what happens with our brains are do you remember that, if you're going to remember 30 different things, do you realize what the trick is? Make a rhyme. make a story. I'm going to give you a list of 5 things. It's yellow, blue, and green. You're going to say, I walked out the door, I saw a yellow car, and then I saw the green plant. Like, you'll actually remember that because it's called associative learning, and you chunk it out. So from that perspective, I'm going to meet a whole bunch of people. My memories for your face is not there. My memory for your logo is not there. My memory for your deck is not there. I want you to associate your branding together with me, together with my message. And that's one of the reasons why decks are great as a visual aid, because you're not getting the depth of sensory information as you would when you're meeting live. So now if you come in to that deck, so now this is the start of your story. What would you say are your key essential messages? What is the thing, if you had to pick the top 3 things that you want me to leave away with? Remember, again, from an arc of a story point of view, I'm not going to remember 90% of it. If you distill down to 10% that you're going to remember, what is that going to be?
I think for me, the goal is to establish trust first thing, so that they feel comfortable taking the next step.
Okay.
If I can accomplish that through the way I speak, the way I talk about my clients, the way I talk about my product, or my access to that product, because it is, an insurer that provides us with our product. To me, it's the connection on the first call. By building trust, then they feel comfortable taking that next step, which is the beginning of the work, the beginning of letting me do the audit or to let me design the program that they want.
Okay. So number 1 is trust. You want to say that the key messages you want people to feel like you can be trusted is what you want to leave with. Okay. What's the second key message you want to get away?
That I'm knowledgeable in my field.
Okay. What's the third key message?
You
get to pick 3. That's a whole thing.
I know. I was trying to think of what
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. That's fine. So these words, you're a thought leader, you show trends, you have leadership, you want to build trust. But the interesting thing is from a content point of view, you're now jumping in from a story point of view and saying, here's the process, which is great, but you haven't established any of those important things up front. Okay. Correct? Would you say? Because
I couldn't skip that.
Well, I don't skip it yet, but there's a mechanism. So, hi, I'm from Marquee Benefits, and what we really are, we're a thought leader that does a deep insight into the markets to bring you knowledge. And I want to share with you some of the trends that are happening in the market today. So you've heard of the Great Resignations. 54% of the people are actually leaving. And this is the trend that I see in Canada. This is what actually happened with X, Y, and Z. And this is how in your industry salaries are increasing. Does this cause a pain point for you? Let's say that's my story start. How many people would say that would be a fantastic way to get started?
Definitely engaging.
Right? Okay, so you have the information. Now, I'm also going to now do this in a manner where if I have that slide, you can do this in a manner where the keywords are there. Now I'm going to talk about the fact that we customize, right? We really are going to go ahead and educate on the trend. So what I'm going to do is, and I'm going to say this is trend analysis. Maybe you have a newsletter that you're sending out constantly that's showing what the trends are. Like there's a mechanism by which you're going to go show, I know what I'm doing, right? So that's the key items that I would want to go put into the deck up front. So I am X, Y, and Z. These are the trends. And by the way, if you remember my webinar, I talked about the trends up front. 54% of the people are leaving, 46% actually have a loneliness issue. There's a 250% increase. Then one of the first things that we did is we connected on that story to say, how much are you suffering from? But I also inked and highlighted and wrote down the key information in order to make sure that that was delivered, right? So now you have 4 modules. You're going to try and drill that down into here. So I'm assuming you're now going into these specific subgroups. The next. So you want to talk about the target and you want to talk about the access. Is that what you said you wanted to do in this particular call
In
today?
this one, we just did the first two.
Okay. Okay, so now you're establishing, the second thing is you finished this particular analysis, and now you're going into the key item one, which is the target, right? And again, in this target, tell me what it is that you want to accomplish. What are the top 3 things that you want me to remember? What is it that I'm looking at here?
This almost seems like the trend one
Okay.
a bit now that I'm looking at it, because I'm going to be talking about the main things we need to establish with a client right up front. Because before we can start customizing a program, we need to identify what their investment threshold is. Do they have competition for talent? Therefore, their benefits program needs to compete. The third thing is, and then how do we risk manage the program? And we use different programs to accomplish that. And that's almost, it's funny, now that I'm looking at it, it almost seems that I put the target is almost speaks to the trend and knowledge piece, like saying that up front rather than, I put it in my process is what I'm looking at now.
That's right. So what you just hit the nail on the head is, yeah, you're talking about a pain point. What is your pain point that you want to go ahead and hammer, right?
Yeah.
So now you start off with a story that's going to help you build the trust. You're going to talk about the things that your prospect is interested in, which is then going to go into the definition of the pain point. And that definition of the pain point is now an open discovery, isn't it?
Yeah.
So tell me the top 3 pain points that you've heard of with your last customer. What were they? So I can show you how I engage.
Okay, so I deal a lot with the small mid-sized market.
Okay.
And a big fear even to get into employee benefits is cost and sustainability year over year. So that's a big piece. And also understand that, and to clarify for them that they do have more control over the cost than they realize. You know, in our industry, you know, back in the day, you know, you had one sort of plan and that was it. And it's a really scary cost for many small businesses. So setting that that piece up front, that there is a way to mitigate risks and cost control right off the bat so that they are comfortable moving forward with that strategy.
So a great segue to this is you practically can have an empty slide where you're going to write that down. So what this becomes is this becomes your meeting notes now. So, okay,
yeah.
So Genevieve's got it. You got a challenge with cost. You have a control. Now, how did everybody feel like when I actually wrote down what she was saying? It's called mimicking. Okay. What I did was I made the important words pop up so she knows that I'm paying attention and my whole audience will immediately get dragged into what I'm saying. With that effect, like, will you immediately get transported to what the key message was? So you're reinforcing the key messages, right?
Right.
So now we only have a couple more minutes left, but I think you're getting the hang of it already. Do you see the difference as to how I would help you to re-articulate this presentation?
Yeah. And I think the way this is set up is almost something I should send after, because it gives them all the words and all the key things that they need to remember. But I should really think of the way I'm presenting more in a, you know, simplified focus, like you said at the beginning, right? To transform it so that it's simple, eye-catching, and then I can, you know, gear them or take them in a certain direction visually, which I'd never really thought of before. I just always had this tendency, and I'm probably not the same, alone, a tendency to want to give more rather than less, right? Like I have a tendency to want to give way more than they need because I want a service and I want to give free advice versus just, you know, engaging that conversation.
Absolutely. Any questions so far? I know we're coming up on short on time. Genevieve, I'd love to do a one-on-one with you. I can help you through, and you know, I'm here. any questions so far on what I've said? Of course, I have lots of webinar series. First question I have for you is did you guys enjoy the webinar? Right? Awesome. Number two is, would you like me to do this again such that you can join and I can do more one-on-ones? Because I'm happy to go ahead and help the M3 community. If there's value, that would be awesome. And if you have questions right now, go for it. Like, ask me, what questions would you have from this process? Any questions or comments? That's no problem. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes back to jump onto the next call, but that's basically it. The idea, to recap the last 2 minutes, is you want to absolutely simplify. You want to go ahead and transform that message. And the way that you're going to go ahead and do all of that is use the deck as a visual aid. You're going to have executive presence. And you're going to go ahead and help your audience focus. So if you can go ahead and get that story arc together and use that deck effectively, you will be dramatic in your impact, which means that, you know, when the buying decision happens, you want to be upfront in that mind. If people go, wow, I met, you know, Jeff or Jim or Adam, Sarah, 3 months ago, I closed my eyes, I do not remember what was presented to me. The probability of you getting the deal or moving forward is way lower. So that's all it's about. So we have lots of tricks like that. And thank you so much for your time today. I hope it was a memorable event.
Can I ask one question that
Yes.
people often ask when you do this, and that is about the touch screen? Do I have to have touch screen technology, a touch screen,
No, you don't.
laptop or screen?
No.
No.
Your investment can be as simple as a $25 item off of Amazon. I use this on my laptop and you just write. So there's a lot of ways you can get started with exactly the hardware you have. So I promise you, the investment for you to transform your presentation is as low as 25 bucks.
It's not hard.
Absolutely.
So, yes, Sarah, actually, you and I should have an offline, because I was using one of those little pads, and then I converted to a touchscreen monitor, so I have a surplus.
For sure. Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been wonderful having you here. Thank you so much for
No
all
problem.
the wisdom, for the highly engaging conversational webinar. This was fantastic. And I always take something away. So thank you for your time today.
Perfect. So much. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.